The moment Ethan Walker set foot on this land, it felt like a weight lifted off his chest. After 30 years of breathing in construction dust, putting up with the screech of concrete saws, and waking up to alarm clocks in the suburbs, he finally got to hear the sound he'd been craving: silence. Not the heavy, suffocating kind, but the peaceful quiet of the Texas countryside, where the wind moves through the grass and morning birds sing, where the first rays of sunlight stretch across endless fields. When he bought this land, Ethan already had a clear picture in his head. He didn't need a big house, a pool, or one of those postcard-perfect white fences from suburbia. All he wanted was space to breathe, a small stable for a few horses he loved, and a solid wooden gate that would close with a deep, echoing click. To him, that sound would be a reminder: this is my land, and in here lies my peace. That gate wasn't something he bought. He built it himself out of thick cedar planks, carving each joint, fitting each heavy iron hinge he'd salvaged from an old job site. To him, it was more than just an entryway. It was the line between the chaos he'd left behind and the life he was ready to build. Every evening, when he swung it shut, the thud of wood against the post felt like the beat of a drum, closing out the day and filling him with a sense of completeness. In those first days, Ethan often sat on the porch of his small wooden house, a steaming mug of coffee in hand, watching the sun cut through the morning mist. Sometimes, he let the soft jingle of the cowbell drift through the breeze like a never-ending country song. Everything felt so simple, almost sacred. He thought back to the years in his old neighborhood, buried under pointless rules, where even a mailbox painted the wrong color could get him a fine from the HOA. Back then, he felt like a man under house arrest. But here, every gust of wind seemed to whisper that he was finally free from those invisible chains. By spring, the pasture stretched out in a deep green, dotted with bursts of yellow wildflowers. When summer came, the sun poured down like fire, but Ethan didn't mind. He wasn't stuck in traffic anymore, sweating on the freeway every morning. Instead, he pulled up a chair on the porch, sipped iced tea, and listened to cicadas singing across the fields. To Ethan, all of it felt like a well-earned reward after a lifetime of hard work. He often told himself, if the rest of my life is just this land, this gate, that's enough. What he didn't know was that the very gate he poured his heart into building would soon become the center of a battle he never saw coming. A fight he couldn't have imagined, not even in his wildest dreams. After a few weeks of settling into his new rhythm, Ethan started to notice the first cracks in his peace. It was a Saturday morning in June, the heat already pressing down even though it wasn't much past 8. He was cleaning out the horse stall when he heard an engine growling in the distance. At first, he figured it was just a truck rolling down the main road. But the sound kept coming closer, louder, until dust rose in thick clouds along the gravel path. In that moment, he caught sight of a shiny white SUV barreling straight toward his gate. Behind the wheel was a polished blonde woman, oversized sunglasses covering half her face. Before Ethan could even get outside, the SUV slammed right through the wooden gate. Hinges snapped, cedar boards shook, and the sound echoed like a tree being split. The woman didn't stop, didn't even roll her window down to apologize. She just sped across the pasture, leaving a storm of white dust swirling in her wake. Ethan froze. His first thought was maybe she'd taken a wrong turn. Maybe her GPS led her off track. But then he caught a glimpse of her in the rearview mirror. There was no embarrassment there, no mistake. Just a smirk, bold and defiant, before the SUV disappeared into the trees at the far edge of the field. That afternoon, Ethan quietly rebuilt the gate. He tightened every bolt, hammered every plank, telling himself it was just an accident. It wouldn't happen again. But less than a week later, it did. This time, he heard the engine earlier. He stepped out onto the porch and saw the same white SUV flying down the slope toward the gate. No slowing down, no turning aside. It hit head-on like a steel arrow. Wood splintered, hinges screeched, and once again, the SUV cut across the field as if it were her own private road. Ethan rushed out, throwing his hand in the air and shouting, "Hey, you're on private land." The woman didn't let up. Instead, she rolled her window down, flashed that crooked smile, and yelled back, "Community easement." That was it. Then she vanished in the dust. Right then, a fire lit inside Ethan. He'd studied the deed. He knew for certain there was no easement. But the way she said it loud, firm, like she owned the rules, left him rattled. Later that day, while picking up some rolls of barbed wire at the farm supply store, Ethan told the story to two old-timers sitting by the counter. They traded a look. One spat a sunflower seed into a paper cup and said, "Sounds like Victoria Hayes to me. She's president of the Pine Hollow HOA. Everybody around here knows her. Good luck with that." The other shrugged and added, "Better watch yourself. She's got a knack for stirring trouble, and she's never alone." Ethan just nodded, but deep down he knew the truth. His peace had just been put to the test. After the second time his gate got smashed, Ethan's patience was gone. He reinforced the hinges with thicker steel, dug the posts deeper into the ground, hoping that next time it'd hold strong enough to stop that SUV. But before he could even finish, things took a turn no one saw coming. One weekday morning, Ethan was stacking firewood on the porch when he heard that all too familiar engine roar. He ran out and saw the sight that had haunted him for days. Victoria Hayes' shiny white SUV parked right at his gate. She rolled the window down, peered through her oversized sunglasses, and in a syrupy, sweet voice said, "You really should leave this gate open. It only bothers the neighbors." He'd shot straight to Ethan's face. He strode closer and shot back, "This is my land. You don't have any right to be here." Victoria smirked, her words dripping with fake kindness but edged with arrogance. "Don't be so selfish. This road saves me 10 minutes every morning. That's what community spirit is all about." Ethan's heart pounded, but his mind stayed ice cold. He let out a dry laugh. "Community? That's trespassing. You're destroying my property." Victoria pressed her lips together, the sun glinting off her sunglasses like some invisible crown. "You're new here, so maybe you don't understand. In Pine Hollow, the HOA makes the rules. Nobody's above the rules." The way she said HOA hit him like ice water. For the first time, the words sounded like a declaration of power. Before he could respond, Victoria slammed the gas, and her SUV tore through, leaving his gate in pieces and dust swirling behind. Ethan stood there, fists clenched so tight his knuckles turned white. The gate was broken again, but worse than the damage was the brazen defiance. The next day, things only got uglier. It wasn't just Victoria anymore. Two more cars followed right behind her. One was a bright red minivan with a big decal that read Pine Hollow HOA proud. The other, a shiny sedan with plates stamped with the name of the HOA treasurer. All three of them cut straight across Ethan's pasture, like he was nothing more than some caretaker guarding land that wasn't his. The breaking point came when Ethan opened his mailbox. Inside was an envelope with the HOA logo. He pulled out a violation notice. "Gate structure does not meet community aesthetic standards. Remove within 7 days or face fines." He let out a sharp, bitter laugh. He wasn't part of their HOA. He didn't pay dues. Yet here they were, sending fines like they had authority over his land. That afternoon, Ethan drove down to the town office to check the property records. The clerk confirmed it no community easement, and his boundary line stood completely separate from Pine Hollow. He carried the stamped copy home, a little lighter at heart, but with one heavy realization. Victoria wasn't just reckless. She was waging a war. That evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the fields red, Ethan sat quietly on the porch. In his hand was the meaningless violation notice. In his chest was something stronger, a certainty. This wasn't about a broken gate anymore. This was about his honor and his right to claim the land as his own. Right after walking out of town hall with the land records in hand, Ethan told himself the proof would be enough to stop Victoria. But he was wrong. Within days, the gate was smashed again. This time the hinges twisted like wire, and the cedar planks split clean in half, scattered across the gravel. He rebuilt it right away. New boards, thicker hinges, posts sunk more than 3 feet into the ground. With every hammer strike, he wasn't just fixing wood and metal, he was wrestling with the same question: when will this gate finally stand firm? Then, one Sunday morning, Ethan decided to change tactics. Instead of patching things up after every attack, he parked his old pickup sideways right behind the gate. He sat on the truck bed, legs crossed, coffee in hand, waiting to see if Victoria dared to try again. He didn't have to wait long. That familiar engine growl echoed from a distance. dust rising in a long trail down the road. The white SUV appeared, gleaming in the sunlight, heading straight for him. About 100 feet away, Victoria rolled her window down and flashed a thin smile. "You're wasting your time," she called out, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "This road belongs to the community." Ethan took a sip of coffee, set the cup down, and answered, steady but firm, "No, ma'am. This is my land. The paperwork says it plain." Her sunglasses caught the sun like a flash of steel. She lifted her chin, her tone low and commanding, like she was handing down the law. "You can't own land that cuts off a community right of way. That's illegal." Ethan almost choked on his coffee. He'd checked the deed twice. There was no clause, no easement, nothing that gave her the right. She was making up laws to suit herself. His voice sharpened. "My advice? Turn around." For a moment, her face flickered with doubt. But then that smug smile came back. She hit the gas, backed up, and sped off the other way, dust swallowing her trail. Ethan sat still, thinking maybe he'd just scored a small win. That hope didn't last. The very next day, coming back from the farm supply store, he found the gate leveled flat. The wooden posts snapped clean, the steel hinges twisted like they'd been crushed in a storm. Deep tire marks cut straight across the dirt and into the pasture. Ethan gripped the steering wheel, chest tightening with a mix of anger and despair. He realized it didn't matter how many times he rebuilt, or even if he blocked it with his own truck, Victoria would always find a way through. This wasn't mischief anymore. This was open war. That night, he sat on the porch, staring into the darkness settling over the fields. Cicadas buzzed all around, but inside him was nothing but a heavy emptiness. And in that silence, one truth cut deep: I wanted peace. But that peace is being stripped away, day by day. After a stretch of what felt like calm, that night Ethan was jolted awake by a sound that made his chest tighten, the sharp crack of wood splitting in the dark. He shot up, grabbed his flashlight, and rushed onto the porch. The night wind howled, carrying the roar of engines. When he swung the light toward the gate, he saw cedar boards flying apart like matchsticks snapping in half. In the distance, 3 beams of headlights cut through the black. First came Victoria's white SUV, followed by a red minivan and a silver sedan. Together they stormed across the pasture like some arrogant parade, tires flinging dirt and gravel, laughter and shouts echoing in the night air. Ethan yelled out, his voice ragged in the wind, "You're destroying my property." But the convoy answered only with blaring horns, taunting him as dust swirled thick around him, choking his throat. By the time the last set of lights vanished into the trees, Ethan was left alone, staring at the shattered gates scattered at his feet. In that moment, his chest ached. This wasn't about Victoria sneaking through anymore. This was a public humiliation, a show of force. The whole HOA crew had torn through his gate together, leaving like they'd just claimed ownership of land that wasn't theirs. The next morning, Ethan drove into town, determined to report it. In the sheriff's office, he laid out every detail from Victoria's first reckless drive through his gate to last night's convoy of destruction. The deputy sheriff listened, chewing on a toothpick, then shook his head. "Without video proof, it's just your word against theirs. And you know she's got connections." Hearing that, Ethan felt the blood rush to his face. His grip tightened on the steering wheel as he left town, anger burning inside. The law wasn't on his side. They'd chosen to look away, all because she held power. That afternoon, at the local grocery store, he overheard neighbors whispering, "Victoria cut through his land again last night. Nobody's going to stand up to her. Even the cops give her respect." Each word cut into Ethan like a blade. He felt abandoned, left alone in a fight where the law should have stood with him. Back home, staring at the pile of broken boards, Ethan dropped to the grass. His hands shook as he picked up the splintered wood, the twisted hinges. Sweat and dirt smeared together, but the real weight wasn't in the labor. It was in the insult. The gate wasn't just wood and steel. It was a boundary, a symbol of his freedom, and they had trampled it without shame. That night, Ethan sat silently on the porch. The air was thick, heavy, broken only by the chorus of insects. In his hand, the flashlight cast a dim glow on the empty spot where the gate once stood. And then, a thought sparked, dangerous, bold. If wood isn't enough to stop them, maybe it's time for something stronger. After the night he watched the HOA convoy tear through his wooden gate, Ethan sat in the dark for a long time, eyes locked on the empty ground where that sacred boundary once stood. Inside him, anger had burned past the point of patience. If what couldn't hold them back, then something else would. If the law wouldn't protect him, then he'd protect himself. The next morning, before the sun even cleared the horizon, Ethan drove his old pickup to the shed out back. He dragged out heavy steel beams left over from past jobs. Some were so heavy a single man could barely lift them, but Ethan knew their weight like his own breath. He checked each old weld, eyes lighting up at the thought, a gate that looked like wood, but carried steel inside. He dug holes for the new posts, this time nearly 6 feet deep. He poured concrete, set the thick steel columns in place. Sweat dripped into the dirt, but his hands stayed steady. Every shovel of earth felt like he was unloading years of bottled-up fury. By afternoon, his longtime neighbor Hank wandered over. An old rancher with sun-beaten skin and silver hair, Hank stopped when he saw Ethan welding steel beams. He leaned on his hip, shook his head, and said, "You're playing with fire, Ethan. If Victoria finds out you're building something this solid, she'll have the cops on you fast." Ethan wiped his brow, his eyes firm. "The cops already left me to fend for myself. If I don't do this, no one will protect this land. They want war. I'll give them war." Hank went quiet for a beat, then let out a dry chuckle. "Well, at least you've got guts. All right, I'll give you a hand." Together, the two men built the frame. They welded every joint tight, reinforced it with crossbars, then covered the front with fresh cedar planks, making the gate look just like the old one. But beneath that would lay a wall of steel, ready to meet any car head-on. Ethan didn't stop there. He dug shallow trenches just inside the gate and filled them with gravel to hide what lay beneath rows of sharpened steel strips, laid out like wolf's teeth. Any car that made it past the gate would have its tires ripped to shreds within yards. By sunset, the two men slumped against the new posts, exhausted but proud. Hank let out a low whistle. "Looks just like the old gate, but what you've got here is a fortress." Ethan nodded slowly, voice low and steady. "That's right. They think all it takes is a hit to bring it down. This time, it's them who'll break." That night, Ethan sat alone on the porch, eyes on the steel-clad gate glowing silver under the moon. The helplessness was gone. In its place, a sharp patience. He knew Victoria wouldn't give up. She'd be back. And when she came, for the first time since he set foot on this land, Ethan would be the one in control. Just a few days after the steel-reinforced gate was finished, Ethan knew he wouldn't have to wait long. With Victoria's arrogance, her return was inevitable. The only question was when. That Saturday morning, the Texas sky was clear, the sun blazing down. Ethan sat on the porch, steam rising from his coffee. His old dog lay at his feet, ears twitching at every sound. Then, from far off, came the growl of engines. Ethan's heart thumped hard, part nerves, part anticipation. He set his cup on the railing and fixed his eyes on the gravel road. Sure enough, Victoria's shiny white SUV appeared, gleaming under the sun. Right behind it, two more cars, the HOA treasurer's red minivan and a silver sedan from another board member. The three vehicles rolled in like an escort, dust swirling in their wake. Ethan drew a deep breath, steadying himself. In his mind, one thought repeated, "It's time." Victoria didn't slow down. If anything, she hit the gas, her face set behind the windshield chin high, lips pressed tight. In front of her, the gate stood tall, looking no different than the old one she'd smashed through before. Bam! The impact thundered like a gunshot. But this time, the gate didn't budge. Instead of splintering, it held strong, and Victoria's SUV took the blow. The front end crumpled like a crushed soda can, airbags bursting, white smoke spilling from the dash. Worse still, as the car skidded forward, the rear tires dropped right into the hidden trench. Snap, snap, snap. The sound was piercing as steel teeth shredded the rubber. In an instant, the SUV lurched and collapsed, crippled in the dirt like a beast caught in a trap. Behind her, the red minivan slammed its brakes, skidding into the ditch. The silver sedan swerved wildly, nearly ramming into the SUV's crushed bumper. Silence fell, broken only by the hiss of flat tires and engines coughing. Then, the SUV door burst open. Victoria stumbled out, hair a mess, face red with dust and rage. She staggered a few steps and screamed, "What the hell did you do, Ethan? You could have killed someone." Ethan rose from the porch, hand resting on the railing, his voice ringing clear. "All I did was rebuild my gate. You're the one who drove into it." Victoria shook with fury, jabbing a finger at him. "This is illegal. You'll pay for this." Ethan walked down the steps, calm as stone. He pointed to the posts, where small cameras blinked red. "This time I installed cameras. Everything's recorded. The video will show who broke the law." As his words carried out, murmurs rippled nearby. Neighbors had gathered from the main road, drawn by the crash. Phones were out, cameras rolling. Laughter broke from the crowd as they saw Victoria, once the bully of Pine Hollow, now standing covered in dust beside her wrecked SUV. One man muttered with a smirk, "Looks like the Queen of Pine Hollow just lost her crown." The chuckle swelled, stoking Victoria's fury. She shrieked, voice cracking, "Stop laughing. This is serious. He has to be held accountable." Ethan crossed his arms, eyes cold. "The only one accountable here is you. I warned you over and over. This is the result." Behind her, the HOA treasurer crawled out of the minivan, limping, clutching his papers. The sedan driver slumped against the wheel, too shaken to step out. In that moment, the balance shifted. Ethan wasn't alone against the HOA anymore. The whole neighborhood had witnessed Victoria's downfall on the very battlefield she chose. Ethan looked around, catching the neighbors' eyes. No longer indifferent. Their faces showed open satisfaction. They'd all suffered her arrogance. Now they watched her undone. Ethan exhaled, a weight lifting from his chest. The gate was no longer just wood and steel. It was proof of his resolve. Just a few days after that historic crash, when the dust on the field hadn't even settled in people's memories, Ethan found a thick envelope stuffed in his mailbox. The paper was embossed, the cover so formal it looked more like a wedding invite. But inside was pure nonsense, a lawsuit from the Pine Hollow HOA. Page after page, it listed charges: reckless endangerment, property damage, willful obstruction of community easement. And the demands? Tear down the gate, pay for Victoria's smashed SUV, and even cover the so-called emotional damages for all 3 board members who'd been there that day. Ethan held the stack of papers, half laughing, half furious. They'd torn down his gate dozens of times, and now they were painting him as the villain. He muttered under his breath, "What a damn joke." Without hesitation, Ethan drove straight to the law office in town. The person he went to see was Martha Cole, a seasoned attorney with silver hair pulled tight and eyes sharp as a blade. She'd been practicing for over 20 years and had a reputation for taking down HOA bullies. After flipping through the complaint, Martha let out a raspy laugh. "This trick? I see it all the time. They know you're not part of the HOA, but they're betting you'll get scared and back down. Their mistake was picking the wrong man." Ethan leaned back in his chair, exhaling. "You think I've got a shot?" Martha tapped her fingers on the desk, a cold smile spreading across her face. "A shot? With the video you've got, I don't just see us winning, I see us countersuing." And that's exactly what she did. Within the week, Martha filed a countersuit: trespassing, destruction of private property, harassment, and fraud for the fake violation notices. Every claim backed by gate camera footage and witness statements from neighbors. When word spread, Pine Hollow buzzed with tension. Some residents sighed in relief, whispering that finally, someone was standing up to Victoria. Others exchanged nervous glances, wary of her power. Because the HOA wasn't just about fines, it was a web of influence, tied into cops, local officials, even nearby businesses. One afternoon, while Ethan stopped at the grocery store, he overheard 2 women talking softly in the aisle. "I heard the HOA's suing Mr. Walker. You think he can handle it?" The other shrugged. "I just hope he wins. We're all sick of Mrs. Hayes." Those words struck Ethan deep. He realized this fight wasn't just his anymore. He was standing up for every neighbor who'd stayed silent out of fear. That night, sitting on the porch with the steel gate glowing under the moon, he gripped the case files tight. The battle had shifted from a dirt road to a courtroom. But this time, he had the law at his back, and he had the truth in his hands. On the day of the trial, the quiet little town of Pine Hollow felt shaken awake. Outside the county courthouse, cars lined the street, and folks gathered in clusters, whispering. Everyone wanted to see Victoria Hayes, the woman who ruled the HOA with an iron fist, go head-to-head with the rancher she'd once looked down on. Ethan arrived early, wearing a worn blue shirt, his sun-browned face calm but steady. Beside him was Martha Cole, small in stature but carrying the cold confidence of someone seasoned in courtroom battles. Victoria, on the other hand, strutted in like it was her stage. She wore a blazing red suit, her blonde hair curled tight, and behind her trailed the HOA board, clutching thick files, waddling after her like ducklings behind their mother. Right out of the gate, the HOA's lawyer stood tall, voice booming. "Your Honor, the defendant Ethan Walker built a trap disguised as a gate. His reckless actions endangered the community. We demand the gate be torn down and full damages paid." A few people in the gallery shook their heads. Others snickered, trying to hold it in. When it was her turn, Martha simply rose, remote in hand. Her voice was even, calm. "Your Honor, the truth doesn't lie in speeches. It lies in evidence." The big screen lit up. First came the clip. Victoria's white SUV slamming into the gate, airbags bursting, tires shredded. Then, one by one, video after video played, each showing Victoria and the HOA board ramming the old wooden gate, laughing, shouting community easement. The courtroom buzzed, then grew louder, until the whole room was murmuring. Victoria fidgeted, face flushed. When called to testify, she snapped. "I'm the president of the HOA. I have the right to protect community access. He can't stop me." The judge slammed his gavel. "Mrs. Hayes, this is a courtroom, not a board meeting. Control yourself." The room broke into laughter, and that laughter cut straight through Victoria's pride. Martha pressed on, her tone sharp as ice. "Mr. Walker is not, and never has been, part of Pine Hollow HOA. The land records confirm this. Every citation issued was fraudulent, and the repeated destruction of the gate committed by Mrs. Hayes and her board was trespassing and vandalism." When the video rolled to the neighbors laughing from the roadside, the courtroom itself erupted. People nodded, some even clapped softly. Victoria shrank in her seat, clutching her purse, her mouth tight, with nothing left to say. Finally, the judge declared loud and clear. The court rejects all claims brought by the Pine Hollow HOA. Instead, Mrs. Hayes and the HOA are ordered to compensate Mr. Walker for trespassing, harassment, and destruction of property. The gavel struck with finality, like a bell tolling the end of an era. Outside, townsfolk gathered, buzzing with excitement. News spread fast not just through Pine Hollow, but across social media. The video of Victoria's SUV slamming into the steel gate went viral. Someone added dramatic music. Someone else captioned it, "You shall not pass." The internet roared, turning Victoria into a national punchline. Ethan stood on the courthouse steps, taking a long, deep breath. For the first time in months, he felt his shoulders lighten. It wasn't just the legal win, it was justice finally standing with what was right. Meanwhile, Victoria slipped out quietly, her face pale, eyes down. Her figure shrank in the crowd's chatter, stripped of all the power she once wielded as the so-called queen of the HOA. After the trial, Pine Hollow was never the same. The name Victoria Hayes no longer stirred fear, it drew chuckles whenever neighbors gathered. One by one, the HOA board members resigned, none of them willing to sink with the ship. The endless stream of violation notices vanished, replaced with the lightness people had been craving for years. Victoria, though, was different. She withdrew, rarely showing her face. And when she did, her eyes darted away, her once perfect curls now a tangled mess. Rumor had it she sold her SUV just to cover repairs and fines. From HOA queen to a woman left standing alone, living under the quiet scorn of the very community that once bowed to her. For Ethan, the ranch finally became what it was meant to be: peaceful. Every morning, he rose early, sipping coffee on the porch as sunlight spilled across the fields, listening to cows low and the wind roll through the grass. The steel gate, wrapped in cedar, still stood firm. Not just a barrier, but a symbol of everything he had fought to protect. Each time he passed it, Ethan laid a hand on the smooth wood and smiled. He knew victory wasn't just about stopping Victoria or forcing the HOA to back down. The real win was keeping his boundary intact, refusing to let anyone, no matter how powerful or arrogant, trample over it. One afternoon, Hank came by. The two of them sat on the porch with cold beers in hand. Hank glanced at the gate, gave a slow nod, and said, "You know, Ethan, that gate doesn't just hold the land. It holds your respect too." Ethan laughed, lifting his bottle. "Yeah, sometimes, to keep respect, you just gotta build a stronger gate." They both laughed, their voices drifting into the country breeze, light and genuine. But deep down, Ethan understood the bigger lesson. The fight with the HOA in Victoria was only a louder version of what everyone faces in life. There will always be people who believe your boundaries are invisible, that they can cross them, take what's yours, and expect you to stay silent. Ethan chose not to stay silent. He rebuilt, again and again, stronger each time, until the trespassers had no choice but to stop. And that became the message he wanted to pass on to anyone who heard his story. In life, we all have a gate. It might not be wood or steel, it might be your time, your peace, your dignity, or your faith. Don't let anyone smash through it just because they think they can. Protect your boundaries, because no one else will do it for you. Ethan leaned back in his wooden chair, eyes drifting toward the horizon. The field stretched wide, the wind whispered low, and the sound of the gate closing rang firm like a promise. For the first time in years, he felt what he had been chasing all along: freedom.